Hello again on YouTube. It's been quite some time since I've greeted you on a YouTube video. But now as we are entering another set of a little bit more restrictive time with the whole COVID situation, I thought it would be a good idea to send out another video. Um, I was thinking about the first time when all of this first started, and I was scrambling. We were all scrambling. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to react. And I was thinking, what would it have been good to have at the first time to help make decisions and guide things a little bit in terms of my own reaction and as a church. And I thought of four biblical principles to guide us at a time like this. I didn't have these at the beginning, but over time I've kind of settled on these things as kind of maybe some of the essentials for me personally. And I thought I'd share that with you. Now, I just want to make a bit of a disclaimer. These are my thoughts. I haven't put these in front of our elders or our board or anything like this. It doesn't represent anything else. It's my thoughts, the principles that I've kind of settled down into in terms of things that help me think through the issues. And I thought maybe that would be helpful for you, because I think we're all a bit fatigued and not really enthusiastic about doing these kinds of things and continuing on and on. So here they are, four biblical principles that help me think about the issues at hand. So the first one is pretty straightforward. It's follow the guidelines. The biblical verse I would go to as a proof text is one you'd all expect me to go to, Romans 13. Everyone must submit to governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. So anyone who rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted and will be punished. So the first subpoint I'd make under that is this principle has nothing to do with what you think about the government policies. It has nothing to do with whether you think the government has gone too far or whether you think the government hasn't gone far enough in the restrictions. It has nothing to do with that. That's not the point that's at issue here. Regardless of what I think, regardless of what you think, what this passage is telling us is that if I don't submit to the governing authorities, I'm actually rebelling against God. I'm not rebelling against the government, because that government that is currently in place would not be there unless God let them be there. The decisions that have currently been made by those in authority over us in political government would not be made if God had a different way he wanted us to go. So it's just that simple. Am I willing to disagree with God? Because God's decision is that these people are in places of government, and these are the restrictions they've put on us. Now, I'd put another point to that just for some nuance, and that's this. Our system of government in Canada actually encourages, and I think even requires, participation. So by saying submit to governing authorities, I am not saying just blindly do whatever they say. I am saying do what they say. But I'm saying there's many and multiple pathways to be engaged in what's happening. We can all write letters, irregardless of what our opinion is, to our MPs, to our governments. We can attend rallies. We can support groups that have legal funds for different purposes that align with our own positions on the things. And all of that is part of submitting to our governing authorities, as long as we do it legally, within what's legal. And there's much that can be done. In fact, our system of government that God has given us works best when all the citizens are actively involved in the process. So get involved. Do what you think you should do. But do it within, or my opinion, the biblical principle that guides me is do it within what is legal. Do it within submitting to the authorities. Do it within, and not because the authority has any great loyalty to me, but because God has put them in place. And I'm actually rebelling against God when I rebel against the governing authorities. So that's the first principle. Follow the guidelines. Whatever they are, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, the biblical principle is follow them. Now, the second principle is sometimes brought forward as a contradiction, and it could become a contradiction to the first, but it's this: do not give up meeting together. So that also is a biblical mandate, and I'm going to talk about that. Hebrews chapter 10 is where that comes from. Let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works, and let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Now, this too is a non-negotiable. So how do these two non-negotiables interact with each other? Well, I do agree that there's a line somewhere where this one would cause us to disobey our government. In my opinion, we're not even close to that line right now. I'll tell you why. I could make a number of arguments that I have, but I'll just share two with you. Two reasons why I don't think our current restrictions are anywhere near the line that is talked about here in Hebrews 10. The first one is a simple historical fact. The author of Hebrews could not possibly have had in mind that we should not neglect meeting in a cedar-ish log-like building at 10:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning in lines of pews with a pulpit up front on the stage. And I mean, he could not possibly have meant that, because those things didn't exist. The Christians at the time Hebrews was written did not have buildings dedicated to worship and church services. They did not have paid pastors of any significance. They did not have even the New Testament as we know it. He couldn't have meant that. It's just not historically. It's not possible that when the author wrote down, "Let us not neglect meeting together," he just can't have meant our Sunday morning service. It's historically not possible. The other reason, I think, and this is the more important reason, is this. The surrounding words are all about function, not form. The emphasis of this passage has nothing to do with the form of how we meet. It has everything to do with the function. What's the outcome? What's the actions that we do when we meet? So let me read that again with that in mind. It says, let us think of ways. And so that would indicate to us, first of all, that the author here is not saying there's just one way to do this. He said, let's be creative. Let us think of ways to get these things done. So I would implore myself and you, let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good work. And then the later part is, but encourage one another. So motivating one another towards acts of love and good work and encouraging one another, those are non-negotiable for the Church of Jesus Christ. Let us think of ways to get those things done. Now, those things are obviously going to involve some form of togetherness. And we are so fortunate these days that we have so many ways to do that. There's Facebook, there's FaceTime, there's Zoom, there's telephones, there's text messaging, there's YouTube videos, there's so many ways that we can continue to do this, and we should not neglect it. You could think of it as the democratization of the ministry. So those two principles, I don't think they contradict each other, but they're both important. The third principle that I would give you is live at peace within the body of believers. Romans 12. Live in harmony with each other. Do not be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people. And don't think you know it all. Never pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see you are honorable. Do all that you can to live in peace with everyone. And I think the everyone there is a reference to the fellow believers. It's not necessarily the whole world. It's focused at the church. So I think with point 1, follow the guidelines, and point 2, do not give up meeting together, there is some room for disagreement. I've told you how I think about it. I know other pastors, other churches have come to different conclusions on those issues, and I'm not here to judge those people. But on this one, it's focused at me. It's not. I can't with this verse in Romans 12 point the finger at anyone else. The only place I can point it is at myself. It's very conclusive, and it's very convicting. It says, do all that you can to live at peace with everyone within the church. As I read that, and as I've thought about these principles, it's kind of convicting. I know for a fact I haven't done everything I can in this current COVID situation to live at peace even with everyone within our church family. I can do better. There's a thought that comes to mind, a question in fact. What was Jesus willing to give up so that I could live at peace with God? And when I ask that question, that's when I realize, no, I haven't done all I can yet to live at peace with all of you. So that's convicting. It has to point at me. Again, this has nothing to do with my opinion on the government restrictions. It doesn't matter what my opinion is about whether they're too strong or too strict or not strong enough. It has nothing to do with that. What it's saying is there are things that I should put on a higher priority than my opinion on those political issues. And the thing that should be high on my priorities is to live at peace with the other believers within the family of God that God has given me. That's more important. That's what Paul's saying here. It's more important than all those other things. It takes priority. I should be willing to give up even my opinion on political issues in order to live at peace with other believers. The body of Christ is the higher concern and takes priority over the others. And then the fourth biblical principle is I should put my hope only in the Lord. I'm going to start with some thoughts and then get to the scripture. And my thoughts here, well, these are just my thoughts. I could be wrong. I don't have necessarily high confidence that I'm right on this, but I'll give you my assessment of the situation and we can take it from there. I think that the year 2020 has put a spotlight on something that was real before, but was hidden from us. You see, Western societies that have come out of the Christian heritage of Western Europe have always followed the same pattern when a crisis comes upon them. Whatever the crisis is, whether it's war or whether it's a health crisis or a natural disaster, and they've always reacted this way. They've taken a step back, the culture, the individuals, but also the whole culture. And that's normal. When you feel under attack, you take a step back. Now, you might come back out strong and fight strongly, but the first thing that happens is you take a step back. And so in all previous emergencies or disasters or critical situations, our cultures have taken a step back. And when they've stepped back, they've stepped into a place of faith in God. That doesn't mean that everyone is a Christian. It doesn't mean that everyone practices the faith continually, but it means that when the crisis comes and life and death situations are in front of us as a culture, we've always stepped back into faith and stepped forward then out of that place of faith. You can even think back as recent in history as 9/11. After 9/11, for a number of years, the churches filled up, and prayer was openly done in schools, in secular schools. I even on some rare occasions heard people on national news channels saying things like "God bless you" instead of "good luck" and stuff like that. And it wasn't criticized. It was rare, but it was there. It was possible. And statistically, there was a bit of a revival, particularly in America. But there's people in the churches today that stepped back into the church at that time and have stayed. And so that was even that reason. But this time in 2020, we have all of these things happening, and some of them I think are fruit, and some of them I think are cause. But when COVID came, or when the people were confronted with mortality, life and death, they stepped back, and as a culture, the majority stepped back into nothing, stepped back into sand, and they freaked out. Our collective reality was freak out, and some embraced the chaos of the sand, and some reached for different things to provide a solid footing. Some reached to government to save us. Some reached to celebrities and sports heroes to save us. Some reached to their cultural heroes and internet blogs to save us. And everyone was reaching and scrambling, and that's still going on, in my opinion, because we've reached this point in our culture where the majority didn't step back into faith of any kind. And so the reaction has been chaotic. It's like a big whirlpool that's just sucking things down into it, and many of us as Christians have got sucked into that flow, and it's difficult not to, because it's all around us. Now, I'm not saying that step back into faith isn't going to happen. I pray every day for widespread revival and a return to faith in God, which could happen at any time and any day in this situation, but currently it hasn't happened yet. And so there's instability. Everyone's feeling the instability, and that includes us, because we live in this culture. But God's word gives us a different option, and we as Christians need to lean hard into this. My hope comes from the Lord. Psalms 121. I look up to the mountains. Does my help come from there? And I think in this context, the mountains is saying the things that look strong and solid and powerful in the created world. Is that where my hope comes from? Does my help come from there? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not let you stumble. The one who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel never slumbers or sleeps. The Lord himself watches over you. The Lord stands beside you as your protective shade. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon at night. The Lord keeps you from all harm and watches over your life. The Lord keeps watch over you as you come and go, both now and forever. My hope comes from the Lord. Don't put your hope in other things to get us out of this situation, because all other things will crumble under the pressure. They will fail. So those four are what keep me stable, have kept me sane in this time. Follow the guidelines. It's not a matter of whether the government's right or wrong. God put them there. If I don't follow them, I'm rebelling against God. Don't give up the functions of the church, motivating one another to acts of love and good work, encouraging one another. It's a democratization. It's the priesthood of all believers. We got to do this together. Live at peace with the church. Do all that I can, not pointing the finger at anyone else, but do all that I can to live at peace with everyone within the family of God that God has given me. Keep my hope on the Lord.